He tasted one and immediately felt a burst of refreshing sweetness that filled his senses. The flavor delighted him, and he thought about how long it had been since he had tasted something so pleasant. Rhea, still munching on her carrot, glanced at Jihoon and asked if he liked wild berries. Her words startled him, and he turned toward her with disbelief, realizing she had known about the berries all along. Rhea calmly explained that she had recently explored outside the village and found them, but she still preferred carrots because they tasted better to her. Rin then pulled out a small pan and looked at them both with a hint of curiosity, suggesting that if raw carrots didn't taste good, she could try cooking them. Jihoon's eyes lit up with excitement at the thought that she could cook. As night fell, the three of them built a small campfire. The flames flickered softly in the darkness while Rain began cooking beside it. The aroma of her meal spread through the air, warm and inviting. Jihoon inhaled deeply, smiling at the pleasant smell. Rain carefully offered them a small portion to taste, and Jihoon, after taking a bite, realized what it was: shepherd's purse soybean paste soup. Rhea took a spoonful as well and found it delicious, while Jihoon stared in surprise, asking if Rain had soybean paste too. Rain blushed slightly as she explained that cooking was her hobby, and she had experimented with making various items from beans. Inside, she felt relieved and proud that she had finally been useful to them. Suddenly, Jihoon's expression changed sharply. He called out to Rain in alarm. Confused, Rain turned toward him and asked what happened, wondering if he had bitten into a rock. Jihoon pointed past her and explained nervously that something was moving in the dark. A deep rumbling voice echoed from behind Rain, commenting on the pleasant smell. Rain froze and turned around slowly, her eyes widening at the sight of two towering ogres standing there. One of them asked the other if he had bitten into something as well, and the second replied that he had. Fear filled Rain's face as one of the ogres extended its massive hand toward her. She flinched, thinking it was going to strike, but instead, the creature picked up one of the carrots she had been using for cooking. Jihoon observed closely, noticing the creature's body covered entirely in wounds. The ogre examined the carrot for a moment, took a bite, and grumbled in disappointment that it wasn't what it was looking for. The second ogre, sniffing the air, remarked that it still smelled good. Jihoon quickly realized that the ogres must have followed the scent of Rain's soup. The first ogre noticed the bubbling pot over the fire and understood that the smell came from it. It stepped forward, curious and tempted, while Rain stood frozen in confusion. The ogre bent down, inhaling deeply over the soup to confirm the aroma. Satisfied that it was indeed the source, it reached out with both hands to grab the pot. Jihoon immediately recognized what it was about to do and tried to stop it, but it was too late. The ogre's hands touched the burning metal, and the intense heat scorched its flesh. The creature howled in pain, dropping the pot and spilling the soup across the ground. Flames hissed as the liquid met the dirt. Jihoon sighed inwardly, realizing that this was the outcome he had tried to prevent. He thought to himself that while he knew ogres had low intelligence, he still wondered how such creatures even managed to survive. He had hoped to recruit them into Warren's forces, but that possibility now seemed unlikely. The burned ogre stumbled backward, crying as it looked at its blistered hands. The second ogre moved forward, announcing its own desire to eat as well. Jihoon frowned, and thought that if things continued like this they might not even reach the cave they were searching for. He activated his ability, his eyes glowing faintly as the information about the creatures appeared before him. Both ogres were B-class, one at level 13 and the other at level 14. Jihoon was taken aback, realizing how powerful they truly were. The second ogre approached the spilled bowl, inhaling the scent deeply. It murmured about how delicious it smelled, and then reached to pick it up, only to burn its hands again from the heat. Pain erupted across its face as it let out a cry. Meanwhile, deeper within the forest, a figure stood near the mouth of a cave, holding apples in his hands. Watching the commotion, he suddenly dropped the apples and sprinted toward the group. Jihoon, seeing the ogre's distress, attempted to reason with them, inviting them to come along with him. At that moment, Rhea sensed danger. As the approaching figure lunged forward to attack, she moved swiftly and blocked the strike. Her eyes narrowed as she demanded to know who he was. Jihoon looked closer at the stranger's ears and immediately recognized the truth, shock spreading across his face. The newcomer was a dark elf. Leo, the dark elf, raised his hand and cast Dark Bind, freezing Rhea in place. Rhea freaked out, yelling what in the world he thought he was doing. Her whole body went stiff like someone had just hit the pause button on her, and she started shouting that she was officially out of service and couldn't move an inch. Leo suddenly charged like he was auditioning for an action movie, swinging his blade at Jihoon. Jihoon didn't even flinch. He whipped out his sword and fired off Abyss slot like he'd been waiting all day for someone dumb enough to try him. Leo felt the surge of energy from the blade and thought that sword carried tremendous magic power. Jihoon, confused and defensive, demanded to know why Leo was attacking them. But Leo responded that this was the question he wanted to ask instead. As Jihoon hesitated for a moment, Leo took advantage of the distraction, striking Jihoon's sword and knocking it slightly backward. Jihoon analyzed Leo's movements and realized that the Dark Elf's preparation stance was a diagonal slash. The next moment, Leo unleashed his technique, Dark Slash, also known as Darkness Cut. A wave of dark energy sliced through the area, splitting an enormous rock cleanly in two. Leo stared in disbelief, wondering if Jihoon had detected the blind spot in his technique and dodged it. He couldn't believe it was possible. Jihoon, still holding his ground, demanded to know the reason behind the attack. He wanted to understand why Leo was targeting them. Leo replied that it was because they were the ones who had attacked the ogres. Jihoon looked shocked, asking if they really attacked the ogres. His mind raced as he thought about the wounds he had seen earlier. Could it be because of those? Leo pointed at the ogres and accused him again, saying not to play innocent, and demanding how he explained their wounds and the scream that echoed moments ago. Jihoon, flustered and panicked, shouted that he didn't know anything about the wounds. He explained that the scream came because the ogres had stupidly touched the pot. Leo narrowed his eyes and repeated the word stupid, questioning it. Jihoon quickly corrected himself, saying that he meant ignorantly. Turning toward the ogres, Jihoon called out to them, insisting that they hadn't given them those wounds. The ogres looked confused, but responded, agreeing with him. Jihoon pointed back at Leo, saying that he heard them himself. But Leo turned to the ogres again and asked if these people had hurt them. The two ogres hesitated before awkwardly answering that, yes, that was right. Leo's anger deepened as he declared that ogres had low intelligence and accused Jihoon of trying to take advantage of that fact. Jihoon, now frustrated, insisted that he didn't know anything about the wounds, but Leo accused him of making excuses, again and again. Then Leo charged forward and attacked him with his sword. Jihoon raised his blade and blocked the strike, his voice rising as he told Leo to just listen until the end. He shouted that it wasn't him. In that heated clash, Jihoon's sword cut across Leo's shoulder. Blood burst out from the wound, spilling heavily. Jihoon immediately felt the sensation it was critical damage, a clean critical hit. He realized that Leo might have seemed insignificant, but his attacks were anything but ordinary. The impact of that exchange was intense. Jihoon's mind raced as he understood that he might have no choice left but to use all his remaining magic power. Rhea arrived at the scene, calling out Jihoon's name with urgency. As she looked ahead, her thoughts raced, realizing the restraint was already in effect. Before either of them could react, Leo, the Dark Elf, unleashed his power. In an instant, black tendrils of magic erupted from the ground, binding both Rhea and Jihoon tightly. The Dark Elf dashed toward them, his eyes cold and voice heavy with command, declaring that it was already too late. A system window appeared before them, flashing the notification Dark Bind. Darkness Restraint was activated, stating that it placed restraint on a designated target with a certain probability, locking movement completely for a short duration. The system further indicated power greater than self, 100% restrained. Rhea's frustration flared as she glared at Leo, anger twisting her expression. She recognized the spell instantly, cursing under her breath that the Dark Elf was using binding magic again. Leo stepped forward, his tone firm, warning them not to move. He reminded them of the village's iron rule: even if one committed a crime, they were granted one chance. He demanded they tell the truth and seek forgiveness from the ogres, but before Leo could react, Jihoon suddenly broke free and attacked from behind. Striking fast, he hit Leo hard, causing the Dark Elf to fall to the ground, wounded. The ogres watching gasped in alarm, shouting out if Leo was okay. Despite being known as the strongest among them, Leo had been defeated. Clenching his teeth in disbelief, he realized the attack had bypassed the restraint completely. Shock spread through him as he thought to himself that he had let his guard down and that the opponent before him might actually be stronger than him. At that moment, Rhea rushed to Leo's side and grabbed his arm, trying to restrain him again, telling him not to move. Jihoon stood beside her, analyzing the situation with a calm yet sharp expression. He explained to her that the darkness restraint, used by the Dark Elves, was an absurdly overpowered skill, one that could restrain anyone of a lower grade with 100% certainty, though its success rate dropped significantly against those of equal or higher rank. He revealed that after checking all the beastfolk's stats, he had designated himself as the target in order to assess them. What he found shocked him: an absurd stat distribution, where everything was focused on critical hit rate and critical damage increase, yet there was no grade or attribute displayed at all. Still, that discovery had helped him avoid the worst possible outcome. Judging from the results, he concluded that his grade was at least A rank or higher. Now, he knew the best situation he could create from this moment onward. As Jihoon analyzed, Rhea looked at him with concern and asked what they should do next. Leo, still kneeling with frustration burning in his chest, thought about his journey, how he had left his home confident that he would return as the greatest warrior, only to realize that perhaps this was all he was capable of. He remembered his father, guilt and disappointment flashing across his face, before lowering his gaze. Finally, he commanded to release them. Jihoon stepped forward and extended his hand toward Leo, his expression sincere. He told him to trust him, assuring that neither he nor Rhea had injured the ogres. He promised to help and suggested they find the real culprit together. Just as the tension began to settle, a sudden voice echoed from behind. A man appeared, his tone mocking as he said he had finally found them, calling the ogres stupid and claiming there was no point in running anymore. Jihoon's eyes widened as his gaze fell upon the man's hand. A silver ring gleamed under the light, and the sight of it left him momentarily shocked. Jihoon's mind raced as he recalled the figure before him, a knight with a silver ring on his lip. It was just for a small purple stone, yet that same knight was infamous throughout the kingdom. He was the one who had massacred the rat tribe. The sound of footsteps echoed Jobek, Jobek, each step heavy with authority. Jihoon couldn't see the man's stats, but his instincts told him enough. An emblem with 3 stars marked the knight's armor, identifying him as an upper knight, an A rank. There were many A rank knights in the kingdom, too many to remember all their faces. But the fact that Jihoon's memory of this one was fuzzy meant only one thing: he wasn't a mainstream character. The knight strode closer, his expression cold and calculating as his gaze swept across Jihoon's group. He muttered about the strange mix before him: ogres, beastfolk, and even humans, wondering what kind of bizarre combination this was. His eyes soon fell on Leo. With a curious hum, he studied the elf's dark skin and pointed ears, realizing what he was: a dark elf. A faint laugh escaped the knight's lips as he thought about how valuable elves were. To him, this hunt had turned lucky. Jihoon's thoughts hardened as he recognized the face of destruction. He questioned whether this was the same man who had raided the rat tribe village. The knight replied with arrogant indifference, confirming it as if it were something trivial. Watching Jihoon daring to talk to a human, Leo couldn't believe it for a moment. The thought flashed through his mind: his companion was really speaking to a human. Jihoon pressed further, asking if this knight was also responsible for what had happened to the ogres. The knight's reaction was laughter, loud, mocking laughter that made Leo's disbelief deepen. Hearing the confirmation, Leo's heart sank with regret for ever doubting Jihoon. He lowered his head and apologized again and again, admitting his misunderstanding. Jihoon looked confused, unsure of the sudden change. Grinding his teeth, Leo realized that even without understanding words, the situation itself spoke volumes. In an instant, he dashed toward the knight with lightning speed that even Jihoon found astonishing. Fast enough to win first place in a marathon if he ever joined one. Leo launched his attack, his magic dagger flashing as he struck at the knight. The knight blocked the blow with his armored hand. The impact didn't harm him much because of the steel protection covering his arm. With a mocking grin, he remarked that the difference in equipped gear was too great. A soft chuckle followed as he mumbled about something unfamiliar, stepping back slightly to reposition. Leo's mind raced. If he couldn't pierce through the armor, he would have to aim where there was none. He rushed in again with all his strength, slashing at the side of the knight's neck. The attack landed, drawing a groan of pain, as the knight cursed the inferior race before him. In retaliation, the knight launched a fierce punch, its power enough to crush bone. Leo managed to block it despite the pain, forcing his body to endure the impact. With a furious roar, he struck again with his dagger, aiming at the knight's chest, but the armor's strength was far beyond his expectations. The blade snapped apart in his hand, leaving Leo stunned. Before he could react, the knight delivered a devastating hit that sent Leo crashing to the ground. Breathing out heavily, the knight muttered that he had gotten a bit too excited. He reminded himself that this was valuable merchandise and couldn't be broken so easily. Jihoon frowned at the word merchandise. Leo, trembling, tried to rise with all his strength, but the knight pressed his boot down on his leg, forcing him to stay on the ground. With a cruel smirk, he repeated the word, yes. This was merchandise. He looked toward Jihoon and the others, and declared that even they could be considered merchandise, though of low value. He didn't know what they were doing in this place, but if they were kingdom citizens, they should already understand how popular monster shows had become. The phrase monster show echoed in Jihoon's thoughts, confusing him. The knight sneered, calling him a human who didn't even know about such shows. Then realization struck the knight. His eyes widened as he finally recognized Jihoon. His tone turned gleeful as he laughed, remembering now who stood before him, the so-called legendary knight. The hunt had turned out luckier than ever, rare ogres, a young dark elf, and even the traitor to humans with a royal bounty on his head. Declaring his intent proudly, the knight announced that he would escort all of them to the kingdom himself. Without hesitation, he rushed toward Jihoon, intent on finishing him off. Jihoon gripped his sword tightly, ready to counter. As the knight closed in, Jihoon struck, but the knight blocked the attack with his bare hand, noting that Jihoon's sword looked quite valuable as well. Jihoon demanded to know if all this was by the king's order. The knight responded coldly that the king's command was absolute. Jihoon muttered that the knight should keep acting, like that being evil made it easier for him to feel less guilty. The knight smirked, saying the words were fitting for a traitor. Meanwhile, Rizel lay nearby, sleeping peacefully, seemingly unaffected by the chaos around him. Jihoon couldn't help but wonder how someone could sleep so calmly when their ally was in danger. Suddenly, Rhea lunged forward and slashed the knight's arm with her sharp nails, drawing blood. Leo, watching the exchange, thought about party mechanics, how members shared experience points, but distribution depended on contribution. He hoped somehow he could feed more experience to Rhea. Jihoon turned toward Rizel and told him to prepare, just in case. Rizel responded only with a loud roar, shaking the air. The knight mocked them, calling them uncivilized creatures, but admitted that they were quite the performers. Chanting under his breath, he invoked an earth attribute skill, Stone Earth Gathering. The ground trembled as stones gathered around his hand, encasing it completely in hardened rock. Jihoon's thoughts confirmed his suspicion. It was indeed an earth attribute skill. The knight, now wielding a massive stone-covered fist, prepared his next move. He roared in anger about the armor that Leo had managed to damage, demanding if they knew how expensive that armor was. Then, with a thunderous swing, he unleashed his Fist of Earth attack, striking directly at Jihoon and Rhea, the power shaking the ground beneath them. Jihoon watched as the A-rank knight, Lockhand, launched a fierce assault. He studied every movement, recognizing the attack's sheer power but also noticing that the weapon's size made it slower. Against the awakened Rhea, it was a poor matchup. Still, Jihoon knew that dragging the fight out would only put them at a disadvantage. At that moment, Rhea leapt down from the top of a tree, aiming directly for the knight. Lockhand responded with confidence, raising his massive rock-like hand and attempting to strike her down. But Rhea swiftly dodged by landing on a nearby rafter, using her sharp claws to tear through the knight's arm in a sudden counterattack. Lockhand froze in shock as blood poured from his wounded arm. Meanwhile, watching Rhea's rapid movements, Leo couldn't hold back his amazement. He muttered in awe that this beastfolk was incredible, moving faster than a cheetah. Just then, Rain turned toward Leo, offering to heal his wounds. Leo looked at her with surprise, confused by her willingness to help, but she gave an awkward smile, admitting that this was all she could do. Without hesitation, she began to heal his injuries, her hands glowing faintly as she focused on mending his wounds. On the other side of the battlefield, Rhea continued her relentless assault. Within mere seconds, she struck again and again, slashing Lockhand repeatedly with blinding speed. The knight's hands were soon covered in deep cuts, as blood streamed down his arms. Even the orc standing nearby was stunned, unable to believe the speed at which Rhea was moving. Jihoon observed Rhea carefully, analyzing every movement she made in her clash against the A-rank knight named Lockhand. He realized the reason why the B-rank Rhea could stand against an A-rank opponent was because of the overwhelming difference in speed. She was relying entirely on her skills. But Jihoon knew that all transformation skills came with a duration limit. Suddenly, Lockhand swung his massive rock hand and delivered a powerful punch that struck Rhea with tremendous force. Rain's voice broke through the chaos as she called out Rhea's name in panic. Rhea was sent crashing into a tree, hitting it hard and groaning in pain. Jihoon's expression turned grim as he thought to himself if this was the end. He adjusted his stance, knowing he needed to carefully align the angle of his next move. If he aimed wrong, Rhea could end up getting caught in it. He began to ready Rizel for an attack. Jihoon knew it was wasteful to use Rizel's area attack on a single opponent, but it meant nothing compared to Rhea's life. They had already gained enough combat experience fighting an A-rank knight. Just as he prepared to act, Jihoon was suddenly shocked to see Leo charging forward again, clutching his broken sword, as he went to fight Lockhand once more. Jihoon felt panic rise within him, wondering why Leo would do such a thing again. Lockhand glared at Leo, and told him to get out of the way, warning that he might tear up everything, top quality or not, to make him submit. Leo's eyes hardened with resolve as he refused to back down, declaring that Lockhand would have to take his life because he couldn't afford to lose to anyone. He rushed forward and attacked, but his strike did nothing. Lockhand's deep voice rumbled as he remarked that he had heard dark elves were troublesome creatures that use debuff magic, but found that to be nonsense. He grabbed Leo and threw him to the ground, his tone turning cruel as he said that thanks to Leo's inferior intelligence, his anger was subsiding a little. He told Leo not to worry because his life had value, but beasts who didn't know their place needed to be beaten. Jihoon, watching from a distance, questioned why he had to go that far. Lockhand replied coldly that he was saying he would spare Leo, but Leo didn't understand. According to him, Leo wasn't at fault. He was simply born as a barbaric inferior race that made cries instead of speaking. Leo gritted his teeth, his mind flashing back to the painful memories of his childhood. Back then, his power had been too weak. His father had comforted him, telling him not to worry too much, assuring that his magic power would naturally increase as he grew. But even after growing older, his power never increased. Everyone around him whispered that the chief's son had less magic power than a child. They questioned how someone like him could be the son of the tribe's chief. Unable to bear the humiliation, Leo eventually left his tribe. As he departed, he vowed to return stronger and declared that he would definitely follow in his father's footsteps. Returning to the present, Leo's thoughts trembled with regret. He thought of his father and silently apologized, feeling broken that he couldn't do it. Jihoon called out to Leo, throwing his sword toward him and telling him to take it. Leo caught the sword, and as soon as his hands touched it, an overwhelming aura of energy began to flow through him. He felt a surge of power within and realized that magic power was overflowing. With this much magic power, he could fight back. Leo charged forward, swinging the sword and striking Lockhand directly in the chest, but the knight stood firm without a scratch. Lockhand laughed loudly, mocking the pathetic attack. Jihoon observed Leo's movement carefully, analyzing the angle of the strike, from the upper right to the lower left diagonal. Then, Leo roared as the sword released an even more overwhelming aura, bursting with full energy. He attacked again with everything he had. The light from the sword spread across the entire forest. illuminating everything as the overwhelming power erupted. Everyone watching was shocked by the sheer force. Lockhand was struck by the attack and sent flying far away as the ground split beneath him, his entire armor, cloth, and gear shattered, completely destroyed. Jihoon stared in disbelief, realizing that Leo's power seemed several times stronger than before. Leo looked at his own hands, unable to believe that he had unleashed such a powerful attack. Exhausted, he collapsed to the ground, staring at the sword and wondering what kind of weapon it truly was. Jihoon immediately called out to Rain, instructing her to treat Leo and Rhea. Rain responded quickly, affirming with a determined "Yes, Chief." Meanwhile, Lockhand, lying half dead on the ground, still managed to speak, cursing that such inferior races dared to stand against him. Jihoon threw his sword toward the fallen knight and told him to put those complaints aside for now and have a different conversation. Jihoon's eyes narrowed as he replied calmly, expressing his curiosity about the kingdom. Jihoon pressed his sword tightly against Lockhand's neck, his eyes sharp with warning. He made it clear that from this moment on, if Lockhand lied to any of his questions or refused to answer, he would show him what that meant. Without hesitation, Jihoon began his interrogation with the first question, demanding to know how many soldiers existed in the kingdom. Lockhand responded that when combining archers and infantry, there should be a little over 3,000 soldiers. Jihoon continued, asking about soldiers like Lockhand who patrolled outside the royal palace. Lockhand replied that he did not know how many subjugation forces there were. Jihoon then asked about those subjugation forces and their purpose. Lockhand's eyes darkened as memories surfaced. The narration shifted to a scene from the past, where the kingdom's majesty had summoned him. The king had addressed him as Royal Guard Oth Division Senior Knight Lockhand. Lockhand had respectfully answered the call, and the majesty declared the need for stronger weapons. He ordered Lockhand to destroy everything around the kingdom, and to find what was needed. Returning to the present, Lockhand continued speaking to Jihoon, explaining that the subjugation forces were searching for enhancement stones to strengthen weapons, and for caves containing iron ore, which were used to reinforce the city walls. Jihoon thought to himself that perhaps his question had been too obvious. He reasoned that in night defense, adventures existed for obtaining items such as enhancement stones or grade stones. He wondered if the subjugation forces were essentially a party assembled for such adventures. Moving on to the next question, Jihoon asked about the two elite knights of the kingdom, Ares and Lib. Lockhand immediately confirmed that he knew them. Jihoon asked for their level, or rather, how many skills they could use, explaining that in the early stages, approximate levels could be inferred from the number of skills. Lockhand stated that both Ares and Lib were known to use 2 skills each. Jihoon analyzed this information, concluding that both were still below level 20. Lockhand then gave a mocking laugh and commented that based on Jihoon's questions about troops and elite knights, it seemed he might be targeting the kingdom. Jihoon responded without hesitation, asking what if he was. Lockhand laughed louder, taunting that with just those few details, Jihoon thought it was possible. He sneered that breaching the walls guarded by 2 elite knights would not be easy, and then revealed that Jihoon was wrong about one thing: there were not just 2 elite knights. Jihoon was shocked, realizing what Lockhand meant. He recalled that in night defense, the maximum number of elite knights a player could have before the game ended was 7. Choosing which S-rank knight to summon during the first wave had a crucial impact on clearing the game. He remembered the progression through each wave, Wave 1, Wave 15, but now, in this early stage, past only Wave 6, the kingdom already had more than 2 elite knights. Lockhand revealed their names with cold certainty: Artillerist Akur and Fanatic Archeon. The elite knights he knew of already numbered 4. Jihoon was left speechless, his mind racing to process the difference between the game and the real world. Unlike the game, this was reality. Soldiers could be injured, and city walls could suffer real damage. Restoring broken defenses and healing wounded soldiers must have required immense time and effort. And yet, the reason such frequent wars were still possible became painfully clear in Jihoon's mind. Then the scene shifted to healing Akur, where she was seen repairing every shattered and broken object around her with precise control, her powers restoring everything to its original state, her radiant energy spreading across the battlefield. Jihoon looked on in shock, realizing the truth behind what he was witnessing. It was because of the healing artillerist Akur. His thoughts raced as he processed that even the sage Archeon existed here as well. There were 4 S-rank knights, and he feared there might be even more. The situation felt beyond comprehension, a ridiculous reality unfolding before his eyes. From the kingdom's perspective, this world was an ultra easy difficulty. But from Jihoon's perspective, trying to break through this power meant facing ultra hell difficulty. Lockhand noticed Jihoon's stunned reaction and mockingly commented on his shock. Jihoon steadied himself and stated that there was one last thing he wanted to ask. His mind flashed with realization there had been no legendary knights in the game. The only player had been him. He was a being that did not exist within the game's system. Jihoon demanded to know what a legendary knight even was, and how Lockhand had managed to summon him. But before he could finish, a sudden barrage of arrows rained down toward him. Rain cried out in panic as she saw the attack, realizing that a large group of humans had surrounded them. Leo's eyes widened in confusion, questioning if Lockhand had allies. From the forest emerged the Royal Guard Oath Division, their armor gleaming as they aimed their weapons toward Jihoon. They shouted for him to get away from Sir Lockhand. Lockhand smirked through his burns and activated his skill, calling out Stone Earth Regeneration. His body began to repair as he declared himself a knight of the Great Kingdom, refusing to give away information so easily. He promised that the one who heard the kingdom's secrets would die there, and he would personally bring Jihoon's corpse back to the kingdom. Jihoon, unfazed, countered that he already knew about the kingdom's movement from the rat tribe. Around 100 soldiers had attacked their village, and if their commander did not return soon, those same soldiers would come swarming this way looking for him. Jihoon added that he had been waiting for them too. Lockhand muttered in anger, calling it a bluff. Jihoon continued coldly, pointing out that if Lockhand was their commander, then all of those soldiers were weaker than him. Lockhand demanded to know how Jihoon could possibly know that. Jihoon simply smirked and replied that it was all just experience. Lockhand's expression shifted in disbelief as he repeated the word experience. Without wasting another moment, Jihoon called out to Rizel, telling it that it was its turn to act. The creature responded with a roar, Rizeldrak awakening its full might. Lockhand laughed mockingly, claiming it was laughable to think such a tiny monster could do anything. Jihoon commanded Rizel to capture them all. Rizel opened its mouth, unleashing its dragon breath technique. Flames erupted from its jaws, engulfing the royal guards in a wave of destructive fire. The system window appeared, displaying new notifications. Party synergy effect activated, increasing magic-type monsters' attack power by 20%. Lockhand, his body caught in flames, still managed to speak in disbelief, calling it unbelievable. Rain, Leo, Rhea, and the orcs stood frozen, their eyes wide with awe as they watched Rizel's overwhelming power consume everything in sight. After a moment, Rizel's flames faded, its strength depleted. The system window displayed a new message. Mana depletion penalty. Fatigue increased. Jihoon approached the exhausted creature and gently patted its head, telling it well done. Rizel gave a faint smile, breathing heavily, but content. Jihoon's thoughts turned inward as he reflected on the recent battle. Since the fight, he had leveled up explosively. Though he found the experience points disappointing compared to the number of defeated enemies, he concluded that most of them must have been low-ranking knights. Still, he considered the outcome a great harvest. Then, as he looked around, a shocking sight caught his attention. All of the burned royal guards began to transform, their bodies hardening and crystallizing until they turned completely into crystal stones. Jihoon examined the enhancement stone, held it in his hand, and wondered internally that enhancement stones did not break even under a dragon's breath. After realizing this, he directed everyone to gather the war spoils. Rhea and Rain agreed and immediately began rushing around to collect everything. While they worked, Jihoon opened the system window and observed the stats of Rizel, Rhea, and Rain. He noted that experience gained by party members was shared and distributed based on contribution, creating a differential distribution. He realized that Rain had only healed during the battle, yet still rose by 17 levels, while Rhea and Rizel, who fought directly, increased by 10 and 7 levels respectively. Jihoon concluded that the experience gained differed according to rank. He glanced at Rhea, Rain, and Rizel, who were all busy picking up enhancement stones. Despite the confusion about experience distribution, he felt relieved that Rizel had reached level 10. Rizel's MP had increased significantly, and a new skill had appeared, causing Jihoon to pause in shock as he recognized a skill he never expected to see. At the same time, far away in Warren, an unexpected change was taking place. Tor was there with the rats, cutting down trees, when an overwhelming power suddenly surged through the area. Tor sensed the strange power and looked around in confusion. Soon, a group emerged, approaching Tor and the rats. As Tor lifted his head, he spotted a massive creature, far larger than any rat, standing behind the bushes. The scene shifted back to Jihoon, who thought about Leo, reflecting that something between them had not yet been finished. His internal counter showed 64%. He questioned why Leo had fought so desperately, even risking himself to protect the ogres, and even shielding Rhea. Leo remained quiet, filled with regret, and internally apologized for everything that had happened to Jihoon. Leo resolved to take the lost ogres to the sea and leave afterward. As he walked, Leo felt weak, and remembered his promise that he would return stronger and follow in his father's footsteps. No matter how much he trained, his magic power never increased. But through the recent experience, he had found a possible path to strength. As Leo prepared to leave, Jihoon observed him, and noted that Leo lacked magic power, possessing only about 1/10 of what a normal dark elf would have, perhaps even less. Jihoon recognized that 2 restraints and 1 slash would exhaust Leo completely. Leo was shocked, wondering how Jihoon knew such things when he was not even a dark elf. Jihoon nervously described it as his unique special ability, an ability only he could use. Leo accepted it more easily than expected, though he felt embarrassed, as if Jihoon could see through him completely. Jihoon then brought up the moment Leo had held the sword, and felt his magic power surge. Jihoon explained to himself that the sword was not ordinary, but a magic sword capable of supplementing magic power and increasing magic attack power. Leo recognized it as a magical weapon, and admitted that he had never seen one of this caliber. Jihoon decided to give the sword to Leo. Leo questioned the reason, and Jihoon intended for Leo to wield the sword and fight by his side. Leo recalled that dark elves never joined hands with other races, yet Jihoon pressed the point that Leo wanted to become stronger. Jihoon understood that Leo's magic power was low, but his physical abilities far exceeded those of other dark elves. Leo's weaknesses were insufficient magic power and low magic attack power. Leo reluctantly admitted that Jihoon's assessment was accurate. Dark elves with little magic power were treated as trash, which was why Leo traveled to find a way to increase his magic power. Jihoon then rubbed an enhancement stone against his sword, and confidently declared that the problem could be solved. He believed Leo's physical abilities were the best among dark elves, and offered to help Leo grow his lacking magic power. Jihoon could continuously increase the weapon's magic power. He took out a B-rank enhancement stone and began enhancing the sword. Leo watched in shock as the enhancement failed. The magic power did not increase. Jihoon tried again. From a distance, Rain noticed the flashes from the enhancement stones, and felt confused. Finally, the sword's magic power increased. Jihoon named the sword Scream Spike, and noted its impressive +11 enhancement. He demonstrated that he could enhance weapons, and declared his intention to maximize Leo's magic power. Leo considered the offer and reasoned that if he truly could become stronger with this method, then it would not be submission, but a rational contract. With hesitation, Leo declared that he would join for 10 years, no more than that, just for a while. Jihoon accepted, though he felt something was off, since 10 years hardly sounded like just for a while. Leo wondered if there was a problem, while Jihoon insisted that 10 years was enough. Jihoon introduced himself as Kim Jihoon, and Leo stated his name as Leonard Bell Leon. At that moment, Rhea, Rain, and Rizel returned with a large collection of enhancement stones. Jihoon was surprised to see so many. Rhea happily presented them, calling them pretty, and mentioned that something strange had happened nearby. Jihoon examined the stones, and realized something unusual. Leo looked at the enhancement stones as well, and excitement spread among them as everyone became delighted by the discovery. Jihoon explained that after that, they ate together and talked for a long time. The conversation focused on the wicked deeds of humans and the recent attacks. He mentioned the enhancement stones the knights possessed, noting that their number, around 220, was not as large as those found at Rhea's house, but many of them were still high grade. Among these stones there was an unexpected and highly valuable discovery. Jihoon instructed her to use it, and she followed his guidance. As she used it, a red aura emerged from her body. The system window displayed a notification confirming that the D-grade gradestone had achieved an 85% chance for grade growth, and the process was successful. Her level adjusted accordingly, showing level 21 due to experience redistribution from 26 to 21. Jihoon observed the result and asked about her condition. Rain felt slightly dizzy but also sensed a powerful surge of energy within her. Jihoon encouraged her to continue and urged her to do it once more. Rain responded with excitement and continued repeatedly, and eventually, morning arrived. The following day, Jihoon stated that they headed toward the swamp where the lizard folk resided. He explained that ogres preferred areas near water, and that Leonard Bell Lion had been guiding the lost ogres along the waterways toward the sea. Because of this, Jihoon persuaded the lizard folk to gather and move to Warren with them, since Warren also had access to the sea. The group continued traveling together along the route. During the long journey, Leon remarked on whether Jihoon was already getting tired. Jihoon felt irritated and pointed out that they had only been walking for days and that the others were the strange ones. Leon responded in confusion, prompting Jihoon to complain that Leon's name was too long and difficult to say. Leon allowed him to choose any name that felt comfortable. Jihoon decided to call him Bell, which surprised Leon due to how much it shortened his name. Suddenly, Rain pointed towards something in the distance and indicated that it might be their destination. She sensed an ominous feeling in the area. Leon expressed concern, acknowledging that gathering the lizard folk was a good idea, but also emphasizing that they were a race as strong as the Dark Elves. He noted that because of their strength, they would not easily serve anyone. Jihoon calmly responded by comparing this to Leon's own situation and told him to leave the matter to him. As he smiled with quiet confidence, a strange presence became apparent, and from the side, they noticed the leg of a creature, as if it had been silently watching them all along. The group continued their journey and passed through a shallow pool, but the ogres sank immediately upon entering the water. Both ogres struggled, sinking deeper and getting into trouble, while Rhea walked across the surface of the water with ease and enjoyment. Leon noticed the ogres drifting far off and panicking, and reacted in shock at how they ended up that far. As the ogres sank further, Leon ordered them to stop. He then stepped onto the water himself and moved forward to help them, while Jihoon grew tense watching the scene. At that moment, someone approached Jihoon and calmly explained that ogres were usually 5 to 6 meters tall and weighed dozens of tons, making the swamp crossing too difficult for such slow-moving creatures. Jihoon turned toward the newcomer and identified the figure as a lizard folk. The newcomer introduced himself as Linak. Behind them, the ogres continued to struggle in the water. Rhea looked at Linak and confirmed that the person was indeed lizard folk. Linak informed them that beyond the swamp lay a lizard folk village. Jihoon replied that they had come all this way specifically to meet the lizard folk. Linak warned them that the lizard folk did not take kindly to other races entering their territory and assumed they already knew this. Jihoon stated that anything valuable was always found on the edge of danger and noted that Linak seemed confident about something. Linak asked why they wished to meet the lizard folk, and Jihoon revealed that they wanted to borrow the strength of the lizard folk to attack the kingdom. Linak laughed and explained that he had wandered for years after leaving his village and had witnessed the atrocities of humans. He understood now why such different races, humans, beast folk, dark elves, and ogres, had banded together for this purpose. Hearing this, Leon let out a quiet sigh of relief. At that moment, Rizel floated toward Jihoon and sat on his head. Linak questioned who the child was, and Jihoon introduced the small figure as his friend Rieseldrak. Rizel yawned once again, and Jihoon commented that the child slept a lot. Linak acknowledged him as a friend, and noted that convincing the chieftain would be difficult, since that day was the chieftain's birthday. Linak explained that the chieftain was young and suspicious, and that they would have to display enough power to succeed. He wished their plan success. He added that he would look after the ogres in the meantime. Leon hesitated and expressed discomfort, but Jihoon insisted and respectfully asked Linak for help, addressing him as an old man. Leon questioned Jihoon's quick trust, but Jihoon urged him to follow, calling him Bell. Leon protested, remarking that he had never seen Linak before, and found Jihoon's trust reckless. Jihoon reassured him and told him to trust him, explaining internally that the old man had a high affinity for him. Leon turned to Rain and wondered whether Jihoon had seen through everything again with that ability, and Rain hesitantly agreed. Linak called the ogres over and invited them to follow him. The ogres refused at first, insisting they could not follow just anyone. Linak understood and offered them food. The ogres immediately softened, admitted their hunger, and decided to follow him. The group advanced toward Mudrak village. Linak remarked that Mudrak would be bustling that day, though it was difficult to see much because of the fog. Jihoon asked how much farther they had to go. Soon, they reached the lizard folk village of Mudrak. Jihoon observed that he never knew a village existed inside the swamp. Rhea noted that perhaps because it was the chieftain's birthday, no one seemed to be around. Jihoon decided they should proceed inside. Rain worried about entering without permission, but Jihoon pointed out that waiting forever was not an option and that they needed to meet the chieftain. Leon reflected that they had followed Linak because they trusted Jihoon and believed there must be a way to persuade the village. Rhea confidently stated that Jihoon always did what he said and declared her belief in him. Leon asked if she liked Jihoon, and Rhea blushed, stuttering in embarrassment as she denied it, and questioned why he would ask such a thing. Jihoon suddenly halted and stated that he heard something. Rhea asked about the sound, and Rain confirmed that she had just begun to hear it as well. Jihoon listened closely and identified it as a pounding sound. He sensed it coming from a certain direction and pointed the way. Rhea urged Jihoon to be careful, but before he could react, a lizard folk soldier launched an attack toward him. Jihoon dodged immediately and recognized the attackers. Leon blocked another soldier's strike, while Rhea leaped forward and attacked the soldiers, demanding they stay away from Jihoon. She attempted to jump in to strike again, but Jihoon called out for her to wait. Before she could react, a soldier struck her hand, injuring her. Jihoon urgently addressed the soldiers and explained that they had not come to fight but had come to meet the chieftain. One soldier observed that a human was speaking their language and concluded that this made him not a guest but a criminal. The soldiers declared the group as intruders rather than guests. They bound the entire group in chains and led them away. As they were taken, Jihoon noted internally that even the lowest-ranking soldier far surpassed their level and realized they had indeed found the right place. He also recognized that the pounding sound originated from there. Leon grew irritated and commented that the lizard folk certainly held a noisy birthday party. A soldier barked at them to stop shouting and move quickly. The soldiers escorted them into an arena, where a kingdom knight was already fighting a lizard folk warrior. In a single swift moment, the lizard folk sliced the knight's throat. Jihoon stared at the scene, bewildered by what was happening there, and wondering why a kingdom knight was present. The lizard folk warrior who had slain the knight bowed deeply before Lyrak, and offered birthday wishes to him. Lord Lyrak continued eating his fish and observed that the warrior's edge had sharpened, praising the battle as a splendid and bloody display worthy of a proud lizard folk warrior. Another lizard folk called for the next match to be prepared. A lizard folk stepped toward the caged kingdom knights and challenged anyone willing to face him to step forward. The knights, unable to understand his words, shouted angrily and told him to get lost, trembling with fear. Among them, a female soldier shook uncontrollably. The lizard folk soldiers who had captured Jihoon and his party arrived before Lyrak and announced that they had captured intruders. Lyrak's attendant examined the bound group and demanded an explanation, remarking that Mudrak lay deep within the swamp, that no one entered without a reason, and that their tribe did not welcome guests. He pressed them again, demanding to know their purpose. Jihoon evaluated the soldiers watching from the stands. They were level 30 to mid-level 35, with ranks ranging from C to A, and their overwhelming firepower surprised him. But the true shock came from the lizardfolk chieftain himself. Jihoon realized the chieftain sitting before them was S rank, level 36. Lirak darkened his expression as he wiped blood from himself and demanded to know why they had invaded Mudrak. Jihoon stated simply that they needed the strength of the lizardfolk. Lirak burst into laughter, and the entire tribe joined him. Rhea grew angry and demanded to know what was funny, while Rain panicked and tried to stop her. Leon urged Rhea to stay calm, reminding her that the negotiation was only just beginning. Rhea questioned the word negotiation, and Leon explained that it was a negotiation in which their lives were at risk. Lirak continued laughing and found Jihoon's claim of needing power amusing. He asked if that was all Jihoon had to say. Jihoon lowered his head and concluded inwardly that they needed to go in strong, because once they bent, they could never stand as equals. This world was built with the same settings as the game, which meant he had already met the essential conditions required to lead the lizardfolk. Jihoon then proclaimed that all lizardfolk would come under him. Immediately, a soldier pressed a spear to Jihoon's throat and called him an insolent wretch for daring to insult their chieftain and their tribe. Rain froze at the sight of the chieftain, nearly fainting, and Rhea stared in shock. Leon recognized that Jihoon was using the method he had hinted at earlier. A soldier insisted that there was nothing more to hear, and suggested cutting all of their throats. Jihoon and Lirak exchanged cold gazes, until Lirak ordered the soldiers to lower their spears. He stated that his choice was the choice of all lizardfolk, and whatever he decided, the tribe would follow. Jihoon declared that he held power and asked the chieftain, if every lizardfolk followed him, then whom Lirak himself would follow. A soldier charged toward Jihoon in fury, calling him arrogant. Jihoon responded calmly by calling out to Rizaldrak. Lirak reacted with confusion to the name. Jihoon repeated it, identifying the being floating above his head as Rizaldrak, and explained that the lizardfolk worshipped and followed dragons, the very being they revered. Lirak hesitated in disbelief and questioned whether it was truly a dragon. Leon turned to Rhea in shock, repeating the word, dragon. He recalled the legendary race known as the Dragon Race, and questioned whether Rizaldrak belonged to it. Rhea reminded him that he had seen the massive attack earlier, and still failed to realize it. Leon admitted that the attack was incredible, but explained that the dragon race had vanished more than 100 years ago. He remembered how his parents described dragons as having massive wings, and possessing the power to destroy entire villages with a single breath. He doubted that the small form before him could be a dragon. Lirak acknowledged that his tribe worshipped dragons, and followed their choice as an absolute law. However, he insisted that the creature above Jihoon was not a dragon. The lizardfolk soldiers grew furious and shouted accusations of impersonating the dragon race. They demanded the intruders be killed. A soldier thrust a spear near Jihoon's neck, and asked the chieftain for a decision. Jihoon considered the situation and questioned internally how the lizardfolk chieftain failed to recognize a dragon, wondering if Lirak truly did not know or if he was pretending. Lirak suddenly paused and announced that he had thought of something entertaining. He noted that there happened to be 4 death row prisoners remaining. Rain echoed the words in shock, realizing they meant death row prisoners. The soldiers ordered the kingdom knights to step forward. Lirak explained that, not long ago, those same knights had broken into Mudrak, stolen their treasure, and brutally murdered a young warrior. He declared that they must fight and that whoever won would keep their life. The surviving kingdom knights stepped forward to face Jihoon's group. Leon protested, questioning why they had to fight, but a soldier silenced him and reminded him that intruders had no choice. Jihoon accepted the situation, stating that it did not matter whether the lizardfolk knew or believed the truth. Leon pleaded for Jihoon to say something. Jihoon announced that he would prove it by showing the true power of a dragon. Humans and beastfolk are shown standing face to face inside the arena, the atmosphere heavy and tense, like the calm before a storm in a tournament arc that everyone knows is about to turn brutal. Among the humans, the yellow-haired knight looks at the beastfolk and speaks with mocking confidence, stating that they really promise to let him live if he wins. Beside him, the armored knight reflects grimly that he was originally doomed to die, but now he finally has a chance to survive, as if the